Hey, welcome to the latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. We've got fantastic guest who's returned to us after about 5 years, I think. Nick Dawson, who's a restorative justice, I suppose campaigner, you would say, now, but does a lot of restorative justice, which we'll talk about, and comes from a background of somebody who had was a victim of a very, very unfortunate death in his family. His brother was murdered. And Nick has a story to tell about that and his journey around that issue. Just before we jump into it, I want to remind folk this is a pre-recorded show. So even though it looks live, actually it's not. But you can get in touch with me. Just don't call me on the number I'm going to give out now while it's being broadcast, because you might get me an inopportune moment. So do get in touch with any questions. WhatsApp is probably easiest, 07506 319 745. Pop me any questions. I could pass them on to Nick. I'm sure he'll give you some contact details. That's enough from me. Welcome back, Nick. It's been a long time since I've seen you, so it's great to catch up with you.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. It's lovely to chat and lovely to connect again.
I was really excited when I got your email. I went, "Oh yeah, that guy." We had that was
Yeah,
back in the days when I was on Men's Radio, wasn't it? Men's
that's
Radio
right. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
came in
So things have
as a guest on.
changed a bit since then. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had a chat about it because there's some similarities in your story with somebody else I know, and
Yes.
mutual connections and all of that.
Yeah.
Um, but before we go any further, I guess people won't know what the story is. So, if you're okay with it, just let us know how you got into this field. What was the event that brought you
Okay.
into an understanding of restorative justice ultimately?
Yeah. So we had a very traumatic, horrific, if you like, family event.
Hmm.
Family. We had my brother Simon, my identical twin, actually.
Yeah.
We were 30 years old at the time, and he was murdered. Um, it was devastating is probably
Yeah.
all the words, all the descriptors for murder. It's hard to describe the impact of somebody who hasn't been through it, but it destroy at the time you feel like you've been destroyed. You've almost feel like your life is over.
Yeah.
So anyway, to go back on the event, it was 27 years ago now, so it is a long time.
Yeah.
Late 90s, 1998, it was the bank holiday weekend in August. We'd just turned 30, my brother and I.
Yeah.
And Simon, I was actually settled down and married, actually. So I didn't do a lot what Simon was doing. He was sort of still a bit of a night owl, enjoyed his nights out. And Simon, being Simon, was out celebrating his 30th birthday with three close friends. This particular night, he'd been out to a place where he wasn't that familiar with, a place called Bromborough in the Wirral, and they'd been to a couple of clubs, or there's some nightclubs in that area, and they'd been out, had a few drinks. Simon was planning to stay at his friend's house that night,
Hmm.
and great night. In the days before mobile phones, if he'd kind of lost contact with, he'd lost the people he was with that night, and by sheer chance, they'd left the club before him, and there was another girl still in the club, and she couldn't find him, and Simon walked out alone. He was seen coming out of the nightclub on CCTV, and what transpired is he was trying to walk home to where his friend's house was, and he wasn't sure of the way, and he actually got lost. Naively asked, well, not naively in a sense, it was a very nice area, but spotted two young lads who didn't know what they were doing, but he just asked them directions. He said, "I'm going to such and such." It's a place called Spittle in the world, if people know it. It's where he was going, and these two young lads, one was 16, one was 19. They tricked him and said, "Come with us. We're kind of we're going that way," kind of thing. Cut a long story short, they led him into a dark wooded park called Brotherton Park, which is in Bromborough.
Hmm.
A very beautiful place, actually. And once they got him in the park, they attacked him. And poor Simon, Simon and I, not the kind of people that would sort of punch and kick or fight back, just almost just do what you need to do, take what you want and go. But I'm sure it was terrifying for Simon. They, in essence, tortured him for his PIN number because he had no cash, just a cash card and a watch. And they just unleashed a horrific attack on Simon, were stamping on him,
Mm,
knocking him unconscious. And these two young lads were high on drugs and alcohol. A guy called Craig and a guy called Carl. And eventually, after they'd got the PIN number for his card, they took his watch and lifted him unconscious and threw him in a fishing pond, and he drowned. And he was found by a man walking the dog
mm.
um, the following morning as an unidentified victim. So yes, we found out on the Sunday, and as a family, it's just it's just shock. It's just very, very deep shock, and lots of questions why, and why us, and what happened. You don't know. And for us, it was a family. It was just Simon had been found beaten up and drowned,
Mhm.
and we just didn't know. So. But we got it in the media very quickly. I was the identical twin. It was quite high profile locally in the Northwest
Yeah.
in the press. And um, eventually, after 2 weeks, we were very fortunate. And I always consider ourselves very fortunate that we had the two people responsible were arrested and they were put on remand. And we had a murder trial a year later.
Mm,
And they were put into prison and found guilty of murder. And they're both given life sentences.
mm.
Craig was 16 when he murdered Simon, and Carl was 19. And at the time, I just thought of them as inhuman almost.
Yeah.
I used to write, I remember writing down a diary during the murder trial, and it was like, rot in hell, you evil. They were just kids who
Mm.
didn't understand what they'd done.
And
And yeah,
just, I mean, what strikes me is the one of the parts of this story that comes out of this horrific event. Um, I mean, we were talking just before the show, and I was talking about how my brother's not a twin; he's a bit younger than me, and not that much younger. He would get annoyed if I call him my brother too much. Um, but in my mind as you're talking, I'm going, if anything happened to my brother, that I
yeah,
would lose it and seek, very serious revenge. I don't know what I would do. But you were twins, so it's
yeah,
almost like it was seeing your mirror image gone. I mean,
yeah,
we know that twins are close. So are you okay to talk about that, what that
yeah.
felt like as well?
No, I mean, I think I'll spend my life processing the twin loss. Um, as a twin, and especially as an identical twin, you are like life
Yeah.
companions. You've got so much empathy, and actually, we had a very protective nature of each other. When one was in trouble, we would always, even though we lived apart, because he lived in the north and I lived in the south when we were adults.
Mhm.
But there's an incredibly close bond there, and losing my twin is. I mean, I said at the time, it's like half of me had died,
Yeah.
because that's how you feel as a twin. You sort of almost two halves of one whole. Um,
And
and
I imagine you and your family went through that whole thing of what should we have done? What could we have done?
yeah,
That you can't help yourself, I guess, but go through that.
the sliding door moments when my mum called him on that Friday night and said, "Are you coming over for the weekend?" Because
Oh, wow.
we'd actually gone up to my parents that particular weekend, and I called ahead to my mum and saying, "Is Simon coming over? So can we see him?" And he said, "No, he's going out on this night." I thought, so does he have to go out? Because we were coming up, my wife and I,
Yeah.
and but yeah, he loved his nights out, so we went out, and we were planning to see him on the Sunday, but obviously he went missing, and we found out he'd gone, and um, the moment for me that will live with me forever, and it's something that I had to do, was when I went to see him in the
Yeah.
mortuary,
Yeah.
because I just couldn't believe that he'd gone, and,
Yeah.
and neither of us could believe it, and we just went to Arrow Park mortuary on that Tuesday after the Saturday when he died, and um, yeah, when they let us go and hold him, and they let us, and I kissed my brother, and
Yeah.
I said goodbye to him, and you know, seeing him there, he was black and blue, and he'd been badly beaten. Um, but it was my chance to say goodbye to Simon, and that'll stay with me for a long time.
It's also, I mean, I remember I empathize in the sense of I had to touch my mum when she died. I just
Oh
couldn't get
yeah,
it in my head that she was dead.
yeah,
It's really strange experience. It's like there she was in front of me, and I was like, no, she's
yeah,
alive. In my head, she was alive, and I couldn't
yeah.
process.
It is exactly that
So
feeling.
weird.
Actually, yeah, it was exactly. I had to touch him.
Yeah.
I had to touch him and see him.
As soon
Uh,
as I touched her, I knew
yeah,
she was dead because there was no warmth. It's not that she was cold, not like in the movies. People aren't cold, but
yeah, that's right,
body
exactly.
temperature had gone, and it's strange touching somebody that you love who's got no warmth in them.
Yeah,
It's just bizarre.
yeah, he was just a shell. Simon wasn't there anymore. He was
Yeah,
just a shell of a body.
yeah.
Um, but I never regret doing that. In fact,
Same here.
it's something that, I was able to process it and to put it real
Yeah,
at the time.
and also
Um,
because this is such a gross, shocking, disgusting event. It's a deliberate assault by people who clearly had no empathy at that point. Were quite reasonably, I would imagine you would at times have described them as in evil terms of evil and wrong and understandably so. I imagine that
yeah,
was the sort of nature of the narrative inside your head and your families.
yeah. There's so many adjectives, you
Yeah,
know, downright cruel for me.
yeah,
Just the whole cruelty of what they did to Simon in his last few moments and tricked him and tortured him. My dad used to describe Simon's death. He wrote a lot of notes, and my dad passed away a couple of years ago.
yeah,
I went through a lot of his notes, and he described that these two young lads had tortured and executed his son.
yeah,
In fact, he wrote a note to Tony Blair at the time because my dad was very angry that the two young lads only got a 10-year and a 12-year life sentence. They
yeah,
only got a recommendation of 10 and 12 years. And we were very incensed about that at the time. They actually ended up spending a long time in prison, over 20 years.
yeah,
So we were okay with that. But yes, no, cruel, savage.
yeah.
Uh, it was just, I mean,
It's
Simon's last few
beyond
moments were
comprehension,
terrifying.
right?
It's,
It's
yeah,
just beyond
beyond
comprehension.
comprehension. Yeah.
I mean, I
Um,
can't comprehend it. And I say that because you did go through a process of learning how to comprehend it, which to me is, again, I don't know how you did it, but you got to a point, well, you tell the story. I mean,
yeah.
you were there, and then what was the journey that you went on with this?
I went through the first few years were extremely tough. You have a lot of my brother had a breakdown. My mum is very private about what happened, but she had a tremendously difficult time. And my
Yeah,
dad immersed himself in work. I think that was his therapy.
yeah,
Um, and was newly married, and I'm lucky that my marriage survived, and it has, and I had children, and I think the way I describe it is I will spend my life finding meaning in this whole thing,
yeah,
and I still do, and I think it's something that you live with for the rest of your life. And murder, it is, I would never use the word closure because I don't think you ever get closure with murder.
yeah.
It's kind of like um, there was this term ripple effect. It ripples through your whole life, and it ripples through maybe even generations
Oh, I
later.
get that
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's outside of the natural order, isn't it?
yeah,
We
yeah.
sort of know somehow that people will die of old age or maybe an accident or of an illness, etc. But this, none of us imagine this is going to happen to us, right?
No, exactly. Um, you, you 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 just spend your life processing it and learning to live with it.
Hmm.
I think that's the best way. And as I say, the early years were very hard. I think my overriding feeling was anger,
Yeah,
real anger inside me, and it used to manifest itself. for example, I get angry at the children, I blast out at my kids
Yeah.
or blast out at my wife. Um, and I know that was the anger inside me from Craig and Carl and what they did to Simon.
Yeah.
And over the years, I had a lot of counselling to try and help, and it did help. Yeah, I had, awful lot of counselling through the years, and
You had counseling to help you manage this stuff with your other relationships, I guess.
yeah. Well, I think the whole thing is processing the shock and the trauma and the
Sure.
grief. I went into in the first year. I went, the grief element. The way I coped with it was, and my wife describes it this way, is I'd kind of like lock myself away. I'd preoccupy myself, keep myself busy. Um, Her and I had a real tough time in the early years of our marriage when we should have been enjoying our time together.
Yeah.
And she never used to see me. I used to hide. I used to just hide away.
Yeah.
That was the way I did. And so I
That
withdrew
would
a
be a
lot.
familiar narrative for a lot of guys, I think.
Yeah,
When faced with really shocking trauma or or mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, men tend to lock it in and
exactly.
evacuate somewhere else.
And not want to share it with the people closest to you, which
Yeah.
is really destructive.
It
Is
is,
that,
isn't
yeah,
it? Why are we programmed in that way? But it's social programming because we need to do the opposite, which is what
yeah,
you subsequently learn.
yeah, exactly.
But I imagine something like you didn't want to burden people with the horrific stuff inside your own head.
No, I didn't. And actually, do you know, one of my protection mechanisms was I would pretend that I wasn't a twin. So when you meet someone for the first time and they say, "Oh, have you got brothers and sisters, blah blah blah, who are you?" I never mentioned that I was a twin because I didn't want to have that
Yeah.
awful conversation about saying, "What does your other twin
I
do?"
mean, yeah, absolutely. I
You
get
know. So
yeah.
so when I
That's a
was
conversation killer, right? But
yeah, exactly. And when I was reflecting years later, when I was
uh,
starting to write a book about it, I couldn't rem I'd kind of almost erased my twin life, which is really bizarre.
yeah,
I actually struggled to come back to my life as a twin and remember what it was like.
I understand.
Um,
You disconnected the neural pathways and
exactly.
invented new ones. No,
Yeah.
I understand that.
Um, but yes, so those feelings of anger uh, boiled and erupted for several years, and then eventually, time does start to sort of heal in a sense. Time is a healer in its own right.
Yeah.
So,
Time and life, if you're still doing
yeah,
life and give it time, yeah, absolutely.
10 or 12 years on, we started to get contact about the offenders, and they're going to come out of prison, and you've got to start to process that.
Sure.
And so we were invited to attend their parole hearings
Okay.
in prison, where essentially you go into prison, you basically face the offender across the table with the parole board, and you read out just a one-page statement of how the crime has impacted you. And it's an incredibly powerful
Yeah.
process for us as a family
Yeah.
when we first started doing it. And for me, when I went into both the offenders, they both heard my mother and my father's statements before I'd gone in because we went in one by one. My mother did it, my father did it, I did it. I've got an older brother who didn't want to be part of the process, and but that was fine, so he didn't get involved. But when I walked in to see the offenders, they were both very emotional.
Yeah.
Having been teenagers in the murder trial, they were now grown men, having spent 12, 14 years in prison.
Yeah.
And instead of seeing a monster, I began to see human beings. I
Wow.
think it was quite transformational for me.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, you know, to see the person that had tortured your brother to death crying and holding a tissue and being very emotional, having heard what my mother had just told him, was
Wow.
a real eye opener to
I feel
me.
like crying right now, to be honest.
Yeah,
I can feel it.
I actually walked
You're
out that
really
room.
upset. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of describe it as like a cloak was lifted from him.
Sure.
He wasn't just a monster; he was a human being,
Yeah.
and he was definitely very ashamed. Um, so this was for both the offenders actually. We both had a similar response. So the meeting with Craig, the parole hearing with Craig, who's the younger offender, um, we eventually, well, I'd heard about this so when I was in the prison where Craig was at. I heard for the first time about this thing called restorative justice,
Yeah.
which is a process where victims and offenders can come together to have a dialogue, a contact, and with an option to talk about it, and to for the victim perhaps to get some some information and express their feelings.
My
And
understanding is it is aimed more at the victim. There's no benefit to the perpetrator as such.
it's kind of it is victim led, but it is both sides.
Yeah. No, it's as in the sense of people, if they join the program, if they're offenders, they don't get time off or anything like that.
Oh no, that's right. Yeah, no, it's very much.
It's a
Well,
voluntary program
it's a
that
voluntary.
the
Yeah, that's
offender
right.
wishes to be
Yeah,
part of because they
yeah,
want to be part of it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, people listening shouldn't take that because an offender does restorative justice, it looks good on their record.
It's irrelevant to that. It's a program.
It's irrelevant to that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Think
to
of
that,
it.
yeah. This is a voluntary thing that both sides can opt into
Yeah.
to help themselves and to help themselves from from a processing angle, if you like. That the
Like
offender
that
going down that
process
remorse
whereby
curve.
you and I did that thing, we had to touch the body of the loved one to know it was real. There's sometimes we have to go through these types of processes, don't we, to
Exactly,
get in
exactly.
touch with
Yeah,
something, reality of it.
yeah. So I mean, yeah. I mean, there were you don't if you think about murder. I mean, restorative justice is used across all the whole criminal justice setting and for multiple, not just in the crime sense.
Yeah.
Um, in a murder sense, it's particularly difficult because how do you say to the family of someone who lost their loved one through a horrific event
Yeah.
that would you like to meet the perpetrator? It's very difficult to broach that topic.
Yeah. And
Um,
all the murders I've known, and I've known quite a few because I used to work in prisons and offender justice and so on. Often they happen momentarily. There aren't that many that happen in this way. I mean, this
yeah,
is particularly sadistic and horrible. And it's extraordinary that you're willing to face this. And people should know this, that it's like really is quite extraordinary, really.
yeah, and I think the best way for me to describe why I was wanting to do it is I came out of that parole hearing with Craig
Right.
so curious about him, and when you have in the murder trial, we didn't find a lot about what happened to Simon that night,
Yeah.
how they met him, the attack on him. I had so many unanswered questions in my head, and years later, this was 17 years afterwards, they were rifling through my head, these questions, and I needed to know.
Yeah.
And the other thing for me was being Simon's twin, I really needed to bring him alive in those last few moments of his life.
Okay.
I really need to know Simon um, just before he died.
Yeah.
I think that was a twin thing.
Yeah.
Um, So there was lots of reasons for me doing the meeting, and yeah, we eventually you go through a long preparation process. We had you effectively do a risk assessment around these kind of meetings. You don't enter into them lightly at all.
Hmm.
And so we had two really good facilitators who would meet with me, meet with Craig, and we did a bit of a back and forth process over a year
Yeah.
before we eventually got to arrange the meeting in the prison where he was at the time, which was Woodhill in Milton Keynes.
Yeah.
So he was at the back end of his prison sentence, but still in a closed prison.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I would describe the meeting with Craig as very transformational for me. You obviously I went into that meeting nervous, um, thinking about am I betraying Simon
Yeah.
by meeting his killer? What would I had a few friends that said to me, "Oh my God, how can you do that?" What would Simon think of you meeting him? And some of those comments upset me, but I wanted to do it, there was times where nearly backed out, but we, Craig walked into that room and we sat down and it was to give people a sort of image. It was in the prison chapel, which is pretty much the quietest place in a
Yeah.
prison. Circle of chairs. I had my wife with me. We had two facilitators. Craig had his probation officer, and I think another officer with him as well. And we had an incredible 4 hours together,
Well,
where we just really just unpacked that night. Um, I describe myself as
that
very lucky.
led that led to you getting involved in this broader restorative justice.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
The meeting was very transformational to
That
me.
was a doorway for you, as it were.
Very healing. Very yeah. And as a result of the meeting with Craig, I've become a real advocate of
Yeah,
restorative justice. I actually do a lot of work in prisons promoting
yeah,
restorative justice now, and I work for an organization called Why Me,
yeah,
who are charitable organization who promote restorative justice and access to it.
yeah.
So I do a lot of work for them. Yes, I mean it's Craig in that meeting was incredibly open and honest to me. And I consider myself very lucky. Some cynics would say I was just doing it just to appease you
Yeah.
and get off. But I mean, believe me, Craig was terrified of meeting me,
Good.
and it was extremely hard for him as it was for me. And I think he did a brave thing by meeting me.
Yeah.
And his observation of me was he was very surprised at how at peace I was, how that I wasn't angry. His reflection afterwards was, I expected Nick to be angry with me, and I wasn't. I wasn't looking for. I wasn't looking to have my peace with him. I was looking to have a dialogue and a conversation, and we talked at length about what had happened and how we both felt about things.
And it also seems to me important that you were there because you wanted to get something from it. You had very clear goals, and
Yeah.
they would be to people who've been through victims of crime. They would understand a lot of the goals that you had, without a doubt. Having some of those questions then answered, because the unanswered questions can be taught to us, absolutely taught
Oh,
to us.
it's right. They sit in your head
Yeah.
all the time.
I think of
Um,
somebody like, for example, the McCanns who've lost a child. They don't have those questions answered. I mean, I don't know how they cope. I don't know how any
you're
parent
right.
copes
You're
with
right.
that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's no possibility of getting those questions
You're
answered.
right. Yeah. Yeah,
If
that must be torturing in a way because you
Yeah,
you have
absolutely.
these gaps and the worries and the thoughts of what happened that night and how and it must be and I can sit here and say
And
I've
even if the truth is horrible, it's still the truth and still needs to be known, right?
exactly that is so important. For me it was I wanted the honest truth about that night.
Yes, of course.
And how, because I remember saying to my wife, however horrible, and I asked him things like, what was the last thing Simon said, and was he crying, and how did you throw him in the pond, and um, how did you attack him, and all those kind of awful things that were very painful. Some of which I don't tell my mum and dad, because it's just that they're just not things that they need to
Just
know.
hearing those questions, I'm finding it difficult to remain composed. It's
Yeah,
incredibly powerful stuff, really powerful.
yeah,
What it
I
seems
needed
to
to, yeah,
me is that it wasn't fair that you had to carry this alone.
yeah, exactly, yeah,
It
yeah,
wasn't fair that it was inside you and there was nowhere to put it.
yeah. Yeah, and that's all about this expression of finding meaning, it's finding meaning and forever spending your life processing what's happened. Um, you you just need to fill in the gaps. You need to know what's happened in detail. Some people, I guess, maybe, there are people that deal with traumas that just want to lock it away and never think about it.
Fair
You know,
enough. Fair enough.
yeah, and
There's
that,
no
and
judgment. People have their own way of processing, but it's really important that people understand these types of processes that are available. And particularly, and we were talking about this just before we started recording, particularly given that at the moment the world feels like there's a lot of angry people in it,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
cycles of
absolutely,
anger and cycles of rage and cycles of revenge. It just seems to be ratcheting up, you know?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's hatred and rage and it's flowing, isn't it?
It really is.
Cycle and it builds of other and it sort of like promotes itself off
And
social media and
just as a human being, can you somehow describe the difference between when you were in the rage and then when you were in the, I suppose, the forgiveness, the compassion, if forgiveness is an appropriate word? What was it like for you inside in those two different states?
I mean, in the early years when I was in the rage start, very angry, I was in some respects not a nice person. I mean, I wasn't, I'm a gentle person at the best of times, but the anger consumes yourself inside you. It consumes you. It consumes your internal energy and your emotions, and it makes you. It bubbles up inside you. Sometimes it manifests itself in different ways,
Yeah.
um, and you go about life not really enjoying your life.
Yeah.
You're living your life, but
I
maybe you pretend you're enjoying yourself, but you're not.
I don't know if this
Um,
sounds a bit fanciful, but it's almost like you were in the prison with those lads.
yeah, yeah. Well, I was letting Craig and Carl get to me. I
Right.
was letting what they'd done
Yeah.
really impact my life in a real negative way. And
Get that. I've gone through a formal process of forgiving an abuser in my life. And the way I describe it is prior to that process, they were just living in my head rent free. After it, they only were in my head when I chose.
yeah, yeah,
Gave
exactly.
me that power of choice,
Yeah,
which was quite an extraordinary event because I thought he was a bit Jack and Ori, to be honest, being a bit of an old bloke. I thought, what are you talking about? This
yeah.
nonsense.
No, no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's someone used an expression on me the other day. Someone who read my book, and they said, I can see how you've jettisoned the poison. That was quite an interesting way of thinking about it because it is a poison inside you.
Yeah. There's
Um,
that sort of Buddha term or saying, isn't it? That
yeah,
being angry at somebody is like drinking poison and expecting them to die.
that's right.
Is it something like that? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm reading a very good book on forgiveness at the moment. I forget the name of it, but um, there's a lot of things that resonate about this book, the things that are said, and one of them is, because we can talk a bit more about forgiveness, is that I would say I forgive, but I'll never forget.
Yeah, no,
Some people say forgive and forget, but forgive and I'll always remember it. Because
I mean, I think of it in these things. If I think about the abuser, I'll forgive, but I will always risk assess with you.
yeah,
Do
yeah,
you know what I mean? It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's
Well,
still
exactly.
reality,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. I mean,
So we're not going to talk about forgiveness today. I think I'd like you to
okay,
come back
okay,
after a certain event. But the reason is because we're running out of time a little bit. So I'm pushing it on to the book because I'd like to get to the book and the show and the
okay.
restorative justice event, if that's okay with
Yeah,
you.
that's right. Yeah, no, that's fine.
So the reason we haven't seen each other for a while is you've been immersed in essentially the restorative justice work, make sure that that's okay, but also writing a book. So tell me about that because I think that must have been quite a I mean, I think anybody who writes a book is there's something wrong with them emotionally. I wouldn't do it.
The,
What was
the
that? What motivated you to want to write the book? So first of all, what's it called and where can people find it?
the book's called Face to Face,
Yeah.
Finding Justice for My Murdered Twin Brother. And it's on all the booksellers. It's on
Okay.
Amazon. It's on Waterstones and all the main booksellers.
Right.
It's actually just come out on Kindle and Audible now. Audible was released this week. And it's also in multiple libraries if you want to take it out from the library. So
Good.
widely available. Yeah, the book was for me a number of reasons why I decided to write the book.
Yeah.
So I think first and foremost, with this story, I've always wanted to help others, and I touched briefly earlier that I do a lot of work in prisons,
Yeah.
and so I've always wanted this story, my story, Simon's story, to help other people, whether that's an offender or a victim, or people working in the criminal justice system. In the book, we talk about the murder, the event. There's a lot about Simon and our twin life, and we talk about the horrific aftermath of murder
Mm.
and how then I led into processing that
Yeah.
through and then having ultimately the restorative justice conference with Craig, and I talk a lot about my reflections after that, forgiveness and it was a very therapeutic exercise actually, and quite cathartic. I'd always wanted to just when my father passed away, and then when one of Simon when I discovered that one of Simon's ex-girlfriends had passed away, I felt it was time to just capture the story
Yeah,
before it was too late.
yeah,
Um, and so I was lucky enough to get a publisher, and we managed to get the process done professionally, and we went away. We went away and really went back to that time. I'd looked at all of the people involved, across the years, and I went back, and what really illuminated it for me was going back and talking to all of Simon's friends,
yeah,
because at the time I'd never really thought much about them. Been seeing them at the funeral, and you've seen them briefly around that time, but then you get consumed in your own grief and loss and don't think about them. And so when I interviewed Simon's friends and his flatmate and his girlfriend and all his very close friends and even the girls that he was with that night, I was taken away with how much their lives have been impacted by what happened.
yeah.
Um, there was a girl that was with the girl that was with Simon in the night on the night who was last in the nightclub. When I chatted to her, the guilt that she harbors,
Yeah, she
uh,
must have felt
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, of
it's
course.
been devastating for her life actually.
Absolutely, without
You don't think about those things. You just don't.
poor girl. She must have been
Yeah,
bits about that. Yeah,
and there was we had what's called a family liaison police officer who was with us for many months afterwards, and I met up with her. His name was Karen, and uh, I, Karen. I could see how much the murder hit Karen hard, and we were in tears when we were talking. And just how much it hit her. Um, just an example, really, so the book allowed me to illuminate that
and
whole
of
ripple
course, those
effect.
people don't get the support, do they? It's not
No,
there.
they don't. That's right.
There is
Yeah,
some support for the immediate family, as you say, but
yeah. In
and
those
so I
days,
often think people who are in that circle, then they don't know if they're supposed to feel bad or not. They sort of
yeah,
think,
exactly.
it
Yeah,
should be the other person. They're the family. They have the feelings. I shouldn't have feelings, is
yeah,
often what people tell me.
exactly. And if in those days in the late 90s, it was even less so.
Yeah,
I think family liaison officers get a chance to offload a bit now and maybe get some support.
yeah,
In Karen's day, when she was doing it, she was right at the raw end of murder and seeing the impact on the family,
yeah.
and being with us through those horrific times, and seeing the effect on my mum, and just how much it impacted her throughout her life
Oh,
was shocking actually.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that whole illumination of the ripple effect was a real eye opener to me.
And
We
that
brought
for
it
me
so
says
well out in the
something
book.
about the construction of meaning as well, that your brother's death is taking on a bigger meaning, isn't it? It's not just the event in the park. You can see
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah,
the impact it had and on people who never even met him, to be honest,
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Even. uh, hearing about, I go back to the Brotherton Park a lot actually,
Yeah,
and where Sam was murdered, and we put a bench there after 20 years, and it's a really lovely bench that overlooks the pond. It's beautiful. And I go there a lot, and sometimes I bump into dog walkers there,
I would encourage people to go and sit on the
yeah,
and think of
but
your brother.
and I talk to people in that park that remember that murder, and how much it impacted
Yeah,
people around the time. And how it was just blighted. It blights place. It blighted the area for a long, long time.
yeah. I mean, there's a woman who was killed not far from where I live, who was known locally, and there's some rituals and shrines outside her house now, and it's genuinely devastatingly upsetting. And we
It
talk,
is.
don't we, at the moment, we talk about how disconnected we are in the world, but actually, I don't know that we are. I think there
No,
is a community and people are feeling these things.
yeah. I mean, it hits the community hard, doesn't it? I think in a lot of these kind of events, they
Yeah,
do impact the community, and you don't really truly understand that ripple effect of how people in the community are impacted. This place is a beautiful fishing pond. and a beautiful nature reserve, and it did impact people in that area for a long time in using that place.
And I'm just
Um,
thinking as well, because just yesterday in the news, we were talking about this. There was the horrific murders up in Manchester, for example.
I
You know, and
mean,
it gets on the news, but actually, it's what you're describing is what people will be going through for the next however many years in
yeah,
the
yeah,
community.
yeah, that's
And
right.
we need to understand that, I think.
Yeah, we don't reflect on it enough, I think, do we? We don't.
I agree.
You know, you think about the individual people involved, but then the wider impact is very significant as well.
Yeah.
The wider impact on lots of other people.
And also, how do people make sense of it? How do they, in your terms, create meaning? And it's really important to ask that question, I think,
Yeah, absolutely, it is. It is.
because
Um,
finding meaning in the face of existential issues, the death, the murder, is a key task, I would say.
Absolutely. You know, it helps. It really helps.
Yeah.
You know, it's about going back and looking at it.
And
Um,
it's also, I think, if people are looking at these events and trying to make sense of them, I'd encourage them to read your book, really, as somebody who's sort of dedicated a significant portion of their life to trying to make sense of what, on the surface, has no sense to it, is just horror, right? And you've been on a very courageous journey. You say there's a show in the West End at the moment that you're going to be part of. Is that right, or something? There's
yes.
punch on.
So we've got this thing called Restorative Justice Week coming up,
Yeah,
and it's the I think it's the 16th to the 21st of November that week.
yeah.
And as part of that week, there's
That's
quite a
when I
lot.
want to see if you can come back. I know you're going to be busy, but I'll get my team to be in
Yeah,
touch.
yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, there's a show on at the West End at the moment called The Punch,
Yeah.
and it's a story about restorative justice. So it's on at the Apollo Theatre. In fact, it's going
And
to go
it's
to
the West End in London for people who are not in London. Sorry. Very,
sorry, yeah, the West End
very
in London.
London
Yeah,
centric. The West End
yeah.
in London.
I think it has been on in Nottingham actually, but anyway, yes. During Restorative Justice Week, and actually for some of the other weeks before that, they're having what's called an after audience discussion after the show, and I've been invited to go on stage to be a person sharing experiences around
I mean,
restorative
literally, the
justice.
first thing I'm going to do when we finish recording is book a ticket if there's one available.
Oh, you should, yeah. So
Without
it's
a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah.
the one that I'm doing is November the 18th.
November
It's
18th.
Tuesday, November the 18th at the Apollo Theatre. And the chair of the discussion is Michael Palin because he's a patron of a charitable associated, a charity that's associated with restorative justice. So it's a big thing to him
Yeah.
as well. So there'll be some of us on stage taking audience questions, and I'll be sharing my lived experience of restorative justice.
Yeah.
So, but that'll be fantastic.
Hey,
I'm looking
folks,
forward to
get
that.
along to this. We are running out of time, I'm afraid, Nick. I was so touched when I got your email the other day because I remember fondly us talking together.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that talk. Yeah,
And also because we knew another Nick that was a twin that had died horribly as well.
yeah,
So
yeah, we did. Yeah, yeah.
there was a touch there. There was no another Simon, your brother.
Yeah. Nick died and Simon's alive. In my case, it was
The
Simon
other way
died and
around.
Nick's alive. Yeah, yeah,
And I hope
yeah,
one day we can do that show as well.
yeah.
Um,
That'd be lovely.
I think it's so important. I think particularly right now because the world seems so frightening and full of hate, but also because um, as men, we're conditioned, we're told that what we should do with this stuff is something quite destructive. And you've done the opposite. You've constructed something very beautiful.
Yeah, I found that getting it out there has been very therapeutic and cathartic. It's like it's not a for me in the early years, murder was something that I was ashamed of, and I kept secret, and I never ever brought it out. In fact, I avoided any opportunity
Yeah,
to talk about it.
yeah.
And now it's kind of like you say, the book's out there. I don't need to be ashamed of it anymore. People know about my twin and what happened, and it's been very healing process for me.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for reaching out. I've been very touched all the way through this show, close to tears, actually.
Oh, thank you, Neil.
I'm
No,
just really
thank you.
holding on to them because
Oh, thank you.
I've got a job to do. I'm going to get through this show, but I might have a weep afterwards. I'm really,
Oh,
really
that's nice of
moved.
you to say.
Really
Yeah.
moved.
No, it's emotional and there's days where I have bad days, and I have good and bad days. Sometimes I'm okay, sometimes not. But I think it's important to, I let myself cry when I want to let myself cry.
I bet your family are relieved that you cry these days rather than shout.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're very proud of the book, I think,
Oh,
and just creating a real legacy for Simon. And that's what, I wanted a legacy for my brother.
I
And
would go maybe a little bit more and say a real legacy for the world. The world needs this at the moment.
yeah, I think so. And, something that helps, um, promote a little bit of healing in the place, and so showing that you can get through, or you can live with the trauma and be at peace with it.
Yeah. You,
That's
we're going to have to finish there. You stay there. Thank you so much for joining us. Folks, if you've had a blob all the way through this, I totally understand it. I'm going to do one afterwards. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you all at the next episode of the Wellbeing Show. So bye bye for now.